Hello, hello. Thank you everyone for joining us. I'm Bing Pen, Product Marketing Manager at Mapbox. This is a builder session, and you will learn the ways to get data into your Mapbox maps. Before we get really started, I have a couple of housekeeping items. All build sessions are recorded, and you will be able to view after the event. Captains are available in multiple languages if you need it. Please submit your questions through Q&A features. If you submit through the Zoom chat, we might miss it. And lastly, you can discover build other sessions in the Zoom event lobby. We have over 60 sessions. Enjoy. All right, now let's get into the good stuff. We're very excited to have Chris Wang, Senior Developer in AngelList and Mapbox. With that, Chris, I will hand it over to you to kick things off. Thank you, Chris.
All right, thank you, Bing, and thank you everyone for joining this session on ways to get data into your Mapbox maps. First, a bit more about me. Coming to you live from Brooklyn, New York City. I've been a developer evangelist here at Mapbox since 2022. I've been a user of Mapbox products from the very beginning. So used Mapbox earlier in my career when I was building mapping web applications for New York City government, countless civic projects and side projects, and I also teach web mapping here in New York at NYU. So I'm going to cover today all the different ways you can bring data into Mapbox maps. So not just web maps, but our mobile maps too, and they all work the same way and they're compatible with the same types of data. So to cover the agenda, we're going to understand the two main approaches, which are putting your data on the map versus in the map, and I'll explain what that means later. For on the map, we're going to use markers and annotations. We're going to show a demo of that on web and iOS. For GeoJSON, we're going to show about how to create GeoJSON by converting shapefiles and CSVs. We're going to load GeoJSON from a URL. We're going to load it from a file. And then we're going to talk a little bit about vector tile sets. So we're going to cover all the different approaches to bring data into your mobile and web mapping applications. So as you know, if you've attended some other sessions today, we just had a great one on the Mapbox standard style. If you've been using Mapbox for a while, you may have used classic styles. So the traditional approach is to bring in a base map or a base style and then add your data to it, either in Mapbox Studio or at runtime. And this is how you make the map truly yours, is by adding that critical information over top of that base map. So the first thing I want to show is this graphic, which covers on the map versus in the map. This is one of the most important concepts before you start adding data to understand, is that there's two substantially different approaches to how you actually add your data. First one is going to be using markers and annotations. And we like to say on the map there because they are actually rendered in the device or in the browser on top of the map or in front of the map. So you can think of them as an overlay. There's no way to position them behind another layer. There's no way to position them under roads or anything like that. They are actually rendered by the device or by the browser and actually sit above the rest of the map. So this has certain trade-offs and certain implications, but it's a fundamentally different way to approach the problem. And then on the right side, we have style with markers or a symbol layer. So basically, you can add your data in the map, and to do that, you need to make sure that your data is added to the map as a source, and then you add layers to visualize that source. This is a graphic I wish existed years ago when we started building with this stuff. So now that I work here, I can commission this sort of thing and make sure it gets added to the correct places in the documentation. And I'm really excited to see this here, and hopefully it helps to explain this concept a little bit further. So to recap, you can either place your data on the map or in the map. So on the map is using markers, which is what we call them on the web, and annotations, which we call them on mobile. They're alike in many ways, but they do deviate in some ways as well. And then in the map, we have two options for sources. So you can either use a vector tile set, which is a vector source, or you can use a GeoJSON source. And we'll cover how we do that. Once those are added, they actually are compatible with the same layer types. So once you either have a vector tile set or a GeoJSON source added to your map, you can use circle layers, fill layers, line layers, and symbol layers to visualize it. Okay, so we're going to start with markers and point annotations. So how this is going to work is I'm going to explain the concept, and then we're going to jump over and actually look at some code. And I'm going to try and switch everything I do here. I want to try and move between web and mobile. I'm going to be doing iOS demonstrations here. So sorry for the Android users, but the concepts are very similar, but I can't cover all three in the interest of time. So first of all, markers and point annotations. So what they do is they take coordinates, so could be mostly used for point data, but you can also do on mobile, you can do lines and polygons. They create a screen element that is pinned to the map that will move when the map moves. So like I said, it's like an overlay. When you move the map, that overlay will move. You can get the data from anywhere. So you can hard code it into your code base. You can pull it from an API. It doesn't have to be in any particular format. As long as you have the coordinates, you can make these markers or point annotations. Doesn't have to be GeoJSON data, but GeoJSON is compatible with it if you can pull out, again, if you can pull out the latitude and longitude, and they're fully managed outside of the map style. So you don't need to understand anything about styles. You don't need to know anything about the style spec. You just need to know the language for how to actually get these things to appear on the map. All right, let's jump over and look at some code. So we'll switch over here to Visual Studio, and hopefully you can see my screen. So I'm going to start here with markers.html, and this is a pretty standard instantiation of a Mapbox map here. So we're centered over, I think that's, well, actually, I think that's New Jersey, actually. Here's an array of city objects. So this is not GeoJSON. This is just kind of any arbitrary array of objects I've set up. But as long as I've got longitude and latitude in here, I can iterate once the map loads. This is what map.onload does. Once the map is done loading, we're going to iterate over this cities array. I've commented out some code here we're going to come to later, but for each one, we're just going to call new mapbox.gl marker, and we'll say set long lat, and then we use the longitude and latitude from that object, and then we're going to add to map. And what this is going to do is add the default markers. So let's run this. And you can see we now have 3 markers that showed up. This is the default marker that is built in with Mapbox.gl.js. We can actually add some options to it. For example, I think we can do size, and we can do 0.5. Let's try that. Maybe it's not size, sorry. Scale, not size, thank you. We can also do color, and you can use any HTML color here when you're using Mapbox.gl.js, but let's just make them purple. So I'm just trying to show you that there are some built-in options that you can use for the built-in marker image. So when people are just starting out with Mapbox.gl.js, I think this is probably the most straightforward way to get custom data onto the map. Obviously, this is hard-coded into the code base, but you can make this as long as you need it to be, and without having to set anything up on the server or set up any special format, you can just hand code latitudes and longitudes in here. So I also want to say that we can extend these. So sorry, in the interest of explaining that these are on the map, not in the map. If we inspect the terminal here, let's search for marker. You can see that I can actually hover these, and these are divs. So these are HTML elements that are positioned on top of the map. And all the styling, like the color, like that's all just done with it's actually an SVG. But what's great about markers is that we can also just style them the way we would any other element. So I'm going to uncomment some of this code, and we'll talk about what it's doing. So let's get rid of this new mapbox.gl.marker, and we'll uncomment this. So instead of passing in the options for scale and color like I showed before, we're actually going to pass in the element property. And L is what we're going to set up in these 7 lines of code here. So we're actually creating a new div in memory in JavaScript, and then we're adding styles to it. So we're giving it a width, a height, a background color. And this is how you make custom markers if you're using markers in Mapbox.gl.js. So let's save and run that. And you'll now see that we have circles here, and these are literally just divs that are shaped into circles by using border radius. And again, if we inspect here, let's search for marker. You can see that I can actually modify these the same way I would any HTML element, and I could change the color here just to preview it. So there's lots of great things we can do with this. You could make it, you could use backgrounds to make it a custom image, but these are really flexible because you don't really have to mess with the map at all. I just loaded the map, and now I've loaded HTML elements here that I have full control over in a regular web development environment. And I don't have to have any special custom knowledge of the map other than instantiating this marker with a custom element. Okay, let's jump over to Xcode and let's see if we can do the exact same thing in a mobile environment. So first chunk of code here, I've got a content view in Swift UI, and sort of similar to the way I set this up in the website, I've got a hard-coded list of cities here, and you can see there's a custom struct for city. It's got the coordinates, which is a CL location coordinate 2D in Swift UI, and we've got a latitude and longitude. So all we have to do at that point is this initiates our map. Then we've got a circle annotation group, and then we've got for each city we're going to do a circle annotation. So circle annotation is grabbing the coordinate from the city. We give it a color, and then we give it a circle radius, and then that's all we need. It'll draw a circle for us. So let's run that in our emulator and see what shows up. So here's our orange circles. Just to prove we can modify this, let's change that to like purple and see what shows up. I'm going to run it again. So circle annotation has its own, its own language that you need to learn, its own API that you need to understand the syntax for. But these are great. And again, I can't inspect these like I did on the website to show you that they're on top of the map, but you can see they're showing up on top of the labels. They're not part of the stack of layers in the base map in Mapbox standard here. They're sitting on top and they're rendered by the device. Okay, so that's markers and some point annotations. I want to go back to markers. Let's go back here and say there's actually multiple ways we can load markers, right? So here I've hard-coded the data in my source code as an object, but we can also pull data in from a URL. So I've got another file here called markers from GeoJSON. And in this case, so we instantiate the map the same way we did before. But when the map loads, we're going to run fetch, and fetch is going to go get some JSON from the web. So this link here is actually a link to the Capital Bike Share public information feed, which is in the Washington, D.C. area. I'm going to open that real quick on its own to show you what it looks like, but this is a public feed of JSON data. Of course, the two things we need most, which are most important, are coordinates. So you can see there's a lon and a lat inside this data.stations object. Lots of other goodies about the station information, but for the purposes of this demo, I just want to show them quickly on a map. So when I download this data, I can parse the response as JSON, and then I say res.data.stations. Remember, it was nested under data.stations. And then for each station in the array, I'm going to do the same thing I did in the previous example, create an element. So this is creating a new div in memory, giving it some style, and then calling mapboxgl.marker, and then passing in that element as the element property. And then I also need the long lat, which I pull from the station data. So I'm kind of taking all that information, mostly the longitude and latitude, and then adding them to the map. Let's run that. So after the map loads, it's going to make that call. Again, I'm looking at New Jersey, so let's move down to Washington, D.C. And here are all my markers. So the first time I showed 3, now I'm showing probably a few hundred. No real performance decrease just yet, but this is one way to get a lot of data onto your map, and you can host that file. It can be JSON that's hosted on your web server. It could be JSON you're pulling from an open data portal or from some other public source. It could be a JSON endpoint for an API that you build. As long as you can get those coordinates into the browser and parse them out so you can pass them into new mapboxgl.marker, you're good to go. Let's switch back over to Xcode and see if we can do the same thing. Let me comment out this struct, this content view. And let's see, circle annotations from a JSON endpoint. So this is actually going to use the exact same endpoint. So we're using that same endpoint of bike share data. Cannot find station in scope. What did I do wrong? Okay, I think we're going to skip that one because I think I had it working and I'm missing a struct definition at some point. No, it's down here. Let's try that. Maybe it'll work. Live demo. Okay, let's run it. Yeah, okay, sorry, I need all this. because I'm doing a call to a JSON endpoint. Okay, let's run that. So I have to decode this JSON data and then pull out the information in it. So we'll run it, but you can see the same thing applies. So these are now circle annotations, but the data didn't come from my code base. It came from a network call. And let's take another closer look at what's happening here. Yes, so I have a state variable called stations, which is empty when the app first loads. And then I have this call to load stations, which will call that endpoint, decode it, and then set the state. So once the state is updated, we're doing the same process of a circle annotation group, and then for each one, we do a circle annotation. So that's looking great. And let's move on. Okay, lastly, I want to show view annotations. So like we did on the web, let's comment this out first. Like we did on the web, we had the default marker that we could use, and then we could also do a custom element. This is kind of the equivalent of on the mobile side is that you can do a view annotation. So instead of a circle, a line, or a polygon, you literally have a view, and a view is any, you can put any content into that view. So you can add the string to it. You could, do your own custom layout and have an image plus text. So here I've got hard-coded data. But instead of calling a circle annotation like we did before, we're going to do a map view annotation. So inside that map view annotation, we just use normal Swift UI syntax, and we can add text. So in this case, I want to grab this label property from one of my cities, and we're still going to show that at the correct location, which we also pull from that city data. So let's run that, and you should see some view annotations on the map. So instead of just basic circles, we're going to get some nice looking labels. So here's New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles. You can see they stay pinned to the map as I move around. And you can imagine, this is the kind of same type of overlay you might have for like a Zillow or a real estate application where you want to show like the price of a listing plus a little icon next to it and put it in a nice little call out bubble. You can design that all using the same syntax you would for any other element on the screen here, and you don't have to learn a whole lot about Mapbox's styling and that sort of thing. Okay, so these are all adding your data on top of the map. Let's jump back to our presentation for a moment. And did I lose my presentation? I bet I did. Oh, maybe I didn't. Okay. So we're back here. Points. So we talked about markers. We talked about annotations. By the way, I showed circle annotations, but there's also polyline and polygon annotations. And you can also do point annotations, which will let you add an image. So if you have an image of a marker, you can add that very easily. Okay, now we're going to say adding your data to the map. So instead of on the map, it'll be to the map. So the data lives in the map and can be positioned in a slot or before an existing layer. So you can use either GeoJSON or vector sources plus layers. If you haven't messed with GeoJSON before, this is what it looks like. You'll find these patterns repeated throughout a lot of the Mapbox ecosystem. But in case we kind of take for granted that everyone knows how to create GeoJSON and where it comes from, and that's not necessarily true. So I want to show you first how to bring how to convert some data to GeoJSON. So I'm going to show a couple of tools that I use pretty regularly when working on this kind of integration. Before I do that, just again, so you're familiar, I found this really helpful graphic. The source is cited in the slide. But understanding sources and layers and how they work together is important. So again, probably a higher learning curve than using markers and annotations that we showed before. But once you master them, they're much more flexible and much more powerful, can handle a lot more data. So again, the sources, we're dealing with two different types of sources that handle vector data, GeoJSON and vector tile sets. And then the layers, you can do circle layers, line layers, fill layers, symbol layers, and symbol layers can be either text or icons. Okay, so first we'll start with converting some data. So I'm going to show two different examples. So first one is going to be OGR to OGR. OGR to OGR is a command line tool that can basically is a interpreter between lots of different formats. So you can install it with the GDAL tools suite and then run the command. And I'm going to show you a quick example of that. So I have in my project here, I've got a uh, CSV called 2.5 week. This is actually earthquake data from the USGS. They have a great service that will like let you download the last week of earthquakes in any around the world. You can like filter it for significant earthquakes. But again, there's lots of data in here we don't need to go into, but the goodies that we want are the coordinates of the location, sorry, the coordinates of the earthquake. And you can see that there is a latitude and a longitude column. So it's actually these first two bits of information here. So how do I convert this CSV into GeoJSON with OGR to OGR? So I got a command here that I've saved. You can say it says OGR to OGR -F means what file format do I want to convert to? And I'm going to say GeoJSON. What file name do I want to output? It's going to be output.geojson. What file do I want to input? Actually, this is wrong. Let's do 2.5_week.csv. Then there's a couple of extended options here. So X possible names, we tell it what the possible column names in the CSV are for longitude. Same for latitude. And then do we want to keep the geometry columns? The answer is no, because we don't care about them anymore. They're going to become the GeoJSON geometry. And then we don't need everything else will become properties of the GeoJSON. So let's run this command. Let's bring up my terminal. Let's go to, I think we're in the right spot. Let's go to CD data conversion. And let's run it right here. All right, so keep your eye on the file list over here. You should see output.geojson magically appear. Let's run that command. And here's output.geojson. So OGR to OGR just processed that CSV and spit out a nice GeoJSON file. Let's scroll down and see here. We've got about 341 features in here. And I could bring this in to a map to show you, but I think the easiest thing to do is actually just to paste it into geojson.io just to confirm that it's working. So we'll go to geojson.io and let's paste that in. Okay, so GeoJSON.io, you should be familiar with these markers now. These are the default markers in Mapbox GLJS. And behind the scenes, it's actually iterating over them and adding the markers. But this actually is validating that the GeoJSON is valid. So if you paste it in here and you see it appear on the map, you know you're good to go to start building with it in your project. So that's one way to look at it. So that's data conversion to GeoJSON.io from a CSV. And then we can also do it with QGIS. So I'm going to load up QGIS real quick. And do I have my, yeah, I have a Montgomery County shapefile here. So let's open, let's reveal this in Finder. And then we're going to go to QGIS and we'll add Montgomery County.shapefile. So I downloaded this from an open data portal in Maryland. I'm from Montgomery County. But this will just be a good test shapefile for us to convert. Notice the coordinate system down here. This does not look like latitude and longitude. So however this was published, worth noting here that like when you use GeoJSON data in Mapbox, it must be in WGS84, which is what we refer to as like the normal latitude and longitude reference system. You'll have to convert the coordinate system depending on where you get your data from, but we can do that very easily. So again, I couldn't use this shapefile directly in a Mapbox project, but all I need to do here is right-click on the layer in QGIS, hit export, and do save features as. Let's do a few more things here. So let's give it a good file name. So I'm going to save it on my desktop, and we'll call it. I already saved one there, so that's fine. Montgomery County County.geojson. And we'll save that. We do need to do this coordinate reference system conversion. So we're going to switch it to EPSG 4326, WGS 84, just a long way of saying latitude and longitude that will be compatible with Mapbox. One last important thing, coordinate precision. When you transform or export GeoJSON from QGIS, it's going to default to 15 digits of precision. You don't need that many. After about 6 or so, it will not make any difference, and the rest of it is all just going to be taking up space in your file. So let's change that to 6. And I think this is good to go. So let's hit OK. All right, and here's montgomerycounty.geojson, and let's see if we can do the same thing here. I'm going to take montgomerycounty.geojson, which I just saved here, and let's go to GeoJSON.io. We're going to clear it, and let's drag montgomerycounty.geojson in there. Okay, so there's our montgomerycounty.geojson. So this is ready to use. I can import this into Mapbox Studio. I could import it into my map. Okay, so now we've learned how to transform CSVs and shapefiles into GeoJSON. How do we actually use it in our map projects? So let me jump back over to Visual Studio, and I've got some more code here. So um, there's actually lots of different ways to load GeoJSON in Mapbox GLJS. So we'll start with having it right in your code. So I could take that GeoJSON that I just created through my OGR to OGR or QGIS, and you can put it literally right into the code in a web environment in JavaScript. So here I'm making a cities object and assigning this feature collection to it. So you can see each feature has got a type of feature, it's got properties, it's got a geometry, which is of type point. And then once I have this in, we need to do, first we need to add a source, and then next we need to add a layer to use that source. So in this case, we're going to call add source after the map loads. We're going to call that source cities. It's going to be of type GeoJSON. And then the data that we want to use in that source is just the cities object, which is what I just assigned up here. Once that layer, if I ended my code here, nothing would change on the map, right? We'd just see a map because we haven't actually added a layer to use that source. So the source just adds it to the map for use, but it won't actually display anything. Once we add layer, that's when it will actually display that data. So these are just cities around the world. So we got NYC, Chicago, and LA, not around the world, in the US. And let's run this code and see what this looks like. Okay, so again, I can't right click on these and inspect them because now these are in the map, they're not on the map. So these are not HTML elements anymore. They are being rendered by the same renderer that's drawing the continents, that's drawing the labels, that's drawing the waterways, that's drawing the bathymetry. So the map they're integrated into the map. You can see they're still showing up on top because by default things will end up in the top slot in Mapbox standard. But let's see if we can add a slot property here. Let's say slot. Let's do bottom and reload. And now you can see this red circle for New York was actually appearing underneath the New York label. Same thing for Chicago, same thing for LA. So these are now part of the map stack, and we can position them wherever we need to. Because we're using Mapbox standard, there's top, middle, and bottom slot. But you can see how that works. You'll also notice the syntax is now different, right? We can't just do some CSS to change the color or change the radius. We have to learn the style specification. So if you haven't checked out the Mapbox style spec, this is where, circle radius, circle color, there's a whole lot of other circle paint properties you need to learn. But for example, if we wanted to make the radii 10 and we wanted to make the color, we can use another HTML color. So let's just make them purple. Actually, let's make them steel blue, my favorite color, my favorite HTML color. And we can do a higher stroke width. So this changes the way that these circles appear. You can also change those dynamically. So when you hover over them, you could have them expand and change color, things like that. So there's a lot of transitions and a lot more power you have with styling once you start using sources and layers. Okay, I want to show. Yeah, we did add GeoJSON from code. Let's switch over to Xcode, and we'll see if we can do the same thing over here. So let's comment out this content view. And what do we have next? Let's see. Yeah, add GeoJSON source from a string in code. So I'm going to uncomment this. We'll talk about it a little bit, and then we'll run it. Okay, so same sort of thing here. We're getting a GeoJSON string, and we're actually storing it as a variable called GeoJSON string. So again, if like in a mobile app, this might not make a whole lot of sense if you want to change it, but if it's something is going to be pretty stable, you could have it right here in the code base, and it's easy to update, and it's in version control. You could also just store it as an asset in your project, so it's in a completely separate file, but you can modify it there. and it kind of lives with the rest of your project. So if it doesn't need to change very often, this can be a good way to get this done. Won't require any network resources to load. It's all just right there already in your app. So what do we do with this? So we have a string called GeoJSON string. Um, we have our map that we're instantiating here. And then once the map is instantiated, we call the same kind of thing we did in the website. We need a source and a layer. So the first thing we do is add GeoJSON source. We give it an ID, and then we tell it where to get its data from. So it's going to parse GeoJSON string and then pass that in. Again, the source is ready to use, but it won't show anything until we set up a layer. So this is the equivalent of add layer, which is to call circle layer. We're going to tell it an ID. We're going to tell it which source it should use for its data. And then same as we saw for those styling properties, we've got circle color, circle radius, etc. So let's run that. All right. And here's our three circles. And same thing applies. I put these in the middle slot. Let's see what they look like when we put them in the bottom slot. Let's change the radius too, just so you can see some live action going on here. Let's change that to purple. And let's hit run again. And what do circles look like in the bottom slot at this zoom level? Doesn't actually seem to make, yeah, okay. So you can see when I zoom in, they're showing up behind like this underground tunnel. So you can change the slot, but this is where they kind of fit somewhere in the map. So that's great. Okay. So that's loading GeoJSON from the code, so we can actually store it right in the code base. What's probably a little more practical is loading it from a network call. So we'll switch back over to web and see if we can do that. So I have GeoJSON from URL. This is mostly the same thing, but instead of passing in an object or a string as data when we do add source, we can pass in a URL. So Mapbox GLJS will call this URL and download it. It needs to return valid GeoJSON. So as long as it's valid, then it will work. And then we do add layer the same way we did before. So I'm going to click on this to show you what that looks like. So this is a feature collection of subway lines in New York City. It's hosted on my GitHub. But actually here, no, it doesn't matter. Let's go look at it. So again, very, very brief code here, but you can call add source without having the data already. You just pass in you give it a URL. Behind the scenes, it will go fetch this data and then add it as a source. And let's see what that looks like. So these are subway stops, not subway lines. But you can see, same thing applies. These are circles. You can see they're staying the same diameter as I zoom in and out. You can do zoom dependent styling if you wanted to. That's something you can't do with markers and annotations. But let's change the colors here and a slot. Let's do a bottom slot. Bottom. Let's change the radius to 10. We're just going to play around a little bit. Oh, okay. Thank you. AI wants to change that to a 3. So let's run that. And now here we have some big fat circles representing these subway stations. But again, I didn't have to, all I need is that URL, and I can go maintain that data elsewhere. Every time this map loads, it'll call that URL. So that's how you load data from a URL. Same thing on the iOS side. Let's switch back over to Xcode. And I've got another code snippet here we can take a peek at. GeoJSON from a URL. So this is doing the exact same thing we were doing on the website. So we're going to call this same GeoJSON file that I have hosted on GitHub in a separate repo. When we call the source, when we say GeoJSON source, we give it an ID, and then all we have to say is .data, .url, and then the source URL. So I could also just hard code the URL right in here, but I stored it as a variable up here. And then the same thing applies. We're just going to add a circle layer. So let's see what that looks like. Okay. So here's our New York City subway stops, and you can see, I think, yeah, I already added them to the middle slot, so you can see they're showing up behind this Barclay Center label. When I zoom in, you'll see the labels are on top. So that's looking great. So, okay, so that's adding GeoJSONs from a URL. So yeah, GeoJSON, very flexible, very easy to implement. I think notable mention also should go back to geojson.io, where you can literally draw your own GeoJSON. So if you don't have data to, convert from some existing source, and you just want like some polygon that's of interest to you, you can literally come in here and use the drawing tools and just say, I want this to exist. This is a zone I care about, and you could literally just copy this feature collection, bring it over into your code base or store it on the web as its own file. But it's all the same format. So once you have this, you can do a lot of different things with it, uh, and put it in the right place that's useful to you before you bring it into your project. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so like I said, last thing we're going to show is tile sets. So vector tile sets. Let me see if I have a slide on this. I think I do. Okay. So vector tile sets are for when, sorry, let me stop that and say, when you use GeoJSON, the big limiting factor here is that you have to load the whole thing. So I was showing you data about subway stations in New York. But imagine that being a global data set of earthquakes with 10,000 points, for example. Even if I'm just zoomed in on New York and I only want to see the things that are in New York, I have to load the entire GeoJSON file. So that's very inefficient, especially if I'm only zoomed in on a small area. So what vector tiles do is they take a large amount of data and they cut it into tiles. And tiles are the same technology that powers the rest of the base map to make sure that whatever area of the map you're zoomed in on, you're only getting data for that specific area. Um, so this is more advanced. So GeoJSON, much easier to use. You can kind of draw your own GeoJSON. You can transform it. To make vector tiles, you need tiles for every part of the world that your data is going to cover. And there's a somewhat sophisticated process of cutting and processing these tiles. They all have to be served as individual files. But you have two options that Mapbox can provide you. One is to upload them in Mapbox Studio. Whoops, let's go back. One is to upload them in Mapbox Studio. The second one is to use Mapbox tiling service. So MTS is a whole other animal, and we've got a couple presentations on that. So I'll save that one, but I will demonstrate here how to use Mapbox Studio to make a tile set, and then we're going to try and use that tile set. So first, let's make a vector tile set. I've got in my code base statecapitals.geojson here. So I'm going to reveal in Finder, and then let's go over to console.mapbox.com. And if I go to the style editor, sorry, data manager, and drag this in and hit confirm, it's going to upload my GeoJSON file, and then it's going to start processing it. So behind the scenes, it is now cutting, we say cut vector tiles. So it's actually going to slice up this data set of state capitals into a vector tile set. I don't need to know what's happening behind the scenes necessarily. I just need to know that when it's done processing, I reference my tile set by its tile set ID, which is this thing right here plus my username. So here is my tile set. I can actually click on it here and inspect it a little bit. So, it's presented here with kind of styling so that is not what you would want to show to an end user, but is for inspecting the data. And let's see. So there's actually multiple layers inside of a tile set. So this is actually the tile set. This is the layer ID, and then let's see how we can get the tile set ID. So I'm gonna grab it from the URL up here, but it's Chris Wong Mapbox, which is my username, plus DZED47AL. So this tile set exists and is ready to be consumed. So the next thing I need to do is actually try and consume this tile set in my code. So I'm going to go back to my front end code, and just like we did for GeoJSON, we still have to add source. So this is actually some older code, so I'm going to update this, and we'll call it state capitals. It is a vector source, and then for the URL, we need mapbox://, and then here's the tile set URL. Then when we add layer, we have to go a step deeper. So like I said, there's multiple layers inside this tile set. In this case, there's only one because I uploaded a GeoJSON file. But if you want to make tile sets that have multiple layers within them, you can do that with MTS. So this is actually the layer we need. So source layer will be this layer layer ID that I copied. So let's make sure that the source for this is state capitals. And we're going to show circles, and let's have a better ID for it. So again, same process. We're doing add source and add layer, but instead of using a GeoJSON source, we're using a vector source. Let's see what this gets us. So let's run, go live. And if I zoom out, we should see circles for all of our state capitals. So what's happening here is when the map loads, we're adding that vector source. If we inspect the traffic, you'll see that it's making lots of network calls to api.mapbox.com. And these are my vector tiles actually coming across the wire. Let's see if I can find one. So yeah, these don't exist because the extent of this data set isn't that large. So it may be requesting areas of the globe that should be in view but don't have any data. But some of these will be valid. So like this one, for example, is one vector tile that is a chunk of the screen that you're seeing right now. And you don't have to concern yourself with parsing that vector tile set. It'll happen in the browser. So this is more of an advanced use case for when you have large data. This can handle, you can have many hundreds of thousands of points or millions of points even, and create a vector tile set for them. Let's switch over to the Xcode, and we'll see if we can do the same thing over there. So let's do a vector source. So we're going to say add a vector source at runtime. So let's update this to use the new source that I just created. So the URL, let's go back and copy it. So it's Chris Wong Mapbox.dz. And again, bike share stations is not a good name for this, so let's call it state capitals. This will now be state capitals. Source layer is going to be this layer ID. And that should work. Let's see if it does. Okay, here's our simulator popping up, and we should see, I'm going to zoom out and see if we get state count. There they are. Okay, so as I zoom, as I change, it's actually fetching new data from the web, from Mapbox servers, and populating this tile set. So again, this one is probably too small and is not a good use case for vector tile sets, but the same scenario would apply if we were using larger data. Okay, I want to move on to, so we added, we made a tile set. We added it as a vector source at runtime in web and in iOS. Now I want to add a tile set to a style in Studio. So last but not least, if we go to Mapbox Studio, let's go to the style editor. Let's make a new style. So I'm going to customize Mapbox standard. Ooh, let's make it monochrome. Let's make it night, so it's like dark. And let's hit customize. So here's kind of a clean slate in Mapbox Studio. What I'm going to do here is actually use the tile set that I just created. So I showed you how to use that in your code, but you can also use it to make a custom style and then use that style in your code or when you set up the map. So this is just a kind of pristine Mapbox standard base map with nothing on it. But if I hit this plus button, I can add a new layer. And I'm going to say custom layer. Now, what's the source for my layer? Just like I did in my front-end code, I need to specify this vector tile set. If I click here, I should see my list of vector tile sets in my account. And let's see, what are my sources? State capitals. There it goes. So this just added it to the style. I can style that circle a little bit better. So let's click on style here, and we'll say, let's make them red. And what do I need to do here? I think we need emissive strength 1. Yeah, there they go. Because we're using standard, we need to apply circle emissive strength. We can do a stroke. Let's do a nice white stroke. of width 1. So now I can use this great graphical interface. And let's save that. So let's publish the style. Hit publish. Style is published. So I don't have to, to use this vector tile set, I can add it to a style and then just use the style. And then it saves me a bunch of code in the front end. And the great thing about setting up a style in Mapbox Studio is you can now use it cross-platform. So I can take the same style I just built here and use it in my web code and in my iOS code, and I'll show you that in just a moment. So let's hit publish, sorry, let's hit share. We're going to get this style URL. Here we go, style URL. This is usable in your front-end code with Mapbox tools. So I will now switch back over to my web code. I'm going to get rid of all this extra code that adds sources and layers and say, I already have a custom style. I don't need to do all this extra work. And when I set up the map, I'm just going to say style and then use my new style URL. So this is a custom style I built. It's got a dark base map and it's got some state capitals in it in red. And let's run this and see what it looks like. Okay, again, I need to change my default Crammer view, but here's my style. So now I can continue coding my front-end code and add interactivity and things like that, but I don't have to mess with actually setting up the data. I've got a vector tile set, I've got a custom style, and if I built it, if I made my vector tile set with MTS, now I could set up a data pipeline to continue updating that data. Just to show you that it still works in the mobile side, we're going to use that same style URL. And let's see. Actually, I'm not sure if I set that up. So let's do map. Where do I do it? Initial viewport. Let's do. You know what? I'm not sure. I don't know if I'm ready to do this off the top of my head. So I think I didn't leave myself a snippet, and in the interest of time, I don't want to have to live code it for you. But anyway, you can use that style cross-platform. So we'll move on. All right. I think that'll end it. I want to leave you with this this comparison slide. So again, for the three main approaches we covered here, you have vector tile sets, which we just finished with, great for very large data sets, highly performant, for covering the entire world, that require a lot of pre-processing, updates need a new publish, less suited for frequent changes. GeoJSON sources are much simpler. They work well for small to medium data sets. You have full style spec styling. You can update them dynamically and just host them as files. So really, really flexible. And then lastly, markers and annotations, probably the easiest thing to do without getting too in the weeds on map styling. But can come with some performance implications if you add too many of them, because they depend on the device or the browser to start rendering all these elements and having to keep track of where they're located as you move the map and that sort of thing. So I think we'll leave it at that, and hopefully we have some time for a few questions. I went a little longer than I wanted, but hopefully this gave you a good overview of all the different ways you can bring data into your Mapbox maps.
All right, thank you, Chris, so much for this insightful demos. I know we have a couple minutes left. We have some great questions. One question from Anish. He asked, "How different is working with the shapes?" I think here the shapes means the polygons. In addition to single coordinates, is there any sessions which could cover rendering shapes on the map?
I mean, the process is mostly the same, especially for GeoJSON and vectors. So you need to learn the style specification, and you need to go to, here, we can actually show you that. We can go to Mapbox style spec. So this is where you learn all the things you can do with different layer types. So let's click on layers, and you'll see that you have, for example, you want to do a fill layer. This is all the things you can do with a fill layer. So you've got fill color, fill anti-alias, fill translate. So I would familiar once you've seen some examples either in the examples app or in the GLJS examples, you can come here to learn the details of how to implement that in your code, or you can actually use Mapbox Studio to style a polygon or a line, for example. And if you export the style, you can actually see the code, the style spec code that went into it.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. I think we might only have time for one more question. Janice, um, Are there options for updating my data dynamically without creating GeoJSON? I want to update my map when a freshman submit a new catch through my app. And also he shared a link.
So it depends on your approach, but yeah, if you're trying to keep your data updated, like I said, you have multiple options. Mapbox tiling services is the way that you would design a vector tile set with a pipeline behind it, so you can update that vector tile set. If if you're just using a GeoJSON layer, um, you can update that in real time, right? So if you have a hosted GeoJSON file that initially set that location, and then you have a new location, you can always change. Once the data is added to the map, you can actually update. You can call set data and actually provide new data for it. So you can, if you have the data changing in real time, all you need to do is shape it into GeoJSON, and then you can update the data while it's already on the map.
Awesome, thank you. I know we are on time. We also have a few questions could not answer live, but we will follow up with you guys. Thank you so much for your time and submitting your questions. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Hope this was
Thank
helpful.
you.